Chapter 7. My feet dangled through the balustrade, floating in the open air as I ate my lunch. The doors to Briar's bedroom sat open at my back, welcoming the warm, perfumed air from her chamber. From my vantage point, I could see the entire city of Highwick, the rolling forest bordering fine townhouses, and out further to the crammed human quarter. Thin trails of smoke curled into the air from the many smokestacks, the wind carrying them away from the wolf part of town. The sound of a string quartet floated up to the fourth-floor balcony where I sat. They'd play and pause, tuning their strings, breaking into jaunty melodies, and pausing again. I recognized this current song from its very first notes. "The Sleeping Queen," I said with a huff. "A little on the nose, don't you think?" Briar sauntered over from where she stood by the mirror, trying the same two earrings back and forth, as if the fate of our kingdom rested on her selection alone. "It's a famous song about our parents. Why wouldn't they play it at my wedding?" I pulled my head back through the railing and gave my sister an incredulous look. "Because they died?" "I think it's nice to remember them on my wedding day. We're in a foreign kingdom with different customs than our own pack. It's nice to have this little part of Olmdare," she shrugged. "And our parents loved each other. We should still celebrate that, even though it ended." I didn't know if my heart could take hearing it in full. I'd heard it around Owlsdale before, hummed by a washerwoman hanging clothes on the line, trolled by a lute in the local tavern. But to hear a proper rendition, something about the joyful notes scratched against my ears. The song was about their happily ever after, about them defeating the sorceress who ultimately killed them. It was a lie preserved in melody. "It should be a sad song," I muttered. Every time I heard those notes, they clinged to me for days, turning my mood sour as I remembered all we had lost. Every vibrato and dip, every pause and crescendo note was a mocking sound that haunted me over and over. "They were happy, though," Briar said, leaning against the balcony door. "They had happiness for a long time before Samhain returned." "Which only makes it more cruel." I leaned back on my hands, my eyes following the lines of smoke as they blurred into the clouds. Why did Samhain wait so many years after Father broke the sleeping curse to return? Why didn't she just retaliate instantly? "She's filled with dark magic," Briar said, as if that could excuse everything. "Who knows what twisted power does to a person? Maybe she needed time to regain her strength. And maybe that compulsion for violence builds slowly, festering over years." "But no one knows, Calla," Briar snapped, clearly getting frustrated. "How many centuries has it been since the last sorcerer? We don't even know what compelled her to turn toward the darkness in the first place. The only people who might have known are long dead." I twisted around to look at Briar. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wide, as if she, too, had wondered about these things. But Briar had the good sense to hide it. Before the rise of Samhain, monsters and sorcerers were myths of the past, things that didn't exist in the world anymore. We knew little about Samhain. There wasn't a single note of where she came from or who she killed to turn herself into a sorceress. That was where the dark took hold. The first kill. It was a teetering precipice anyone who killed could fall into, one that soldiers trained to withstand. Those with enough of it in their souls could turn just as we could turn into wolves. It was a one-way shift, a magical change that the world knew little about. Lean into the darkness and forever be consumed. Samhain had been swallowed whole, and then turned her dark hunger on my family, my pack, my kingdom. Why? The strings started playing again, and I was relieved it was a different tune. Even so, the brand of "The Sleeping Queen" burned into me. I was glad I didn't have to hear those final sweeping notes, but the lyrics looped over and over in my mind, replaying before reaching the final refrain, the happy ending that never came. I lounged on my sister's bed, a bowl of candied almonds tucked beside me, as I watched the seamstress fit Briar into her wedding dress. Briar's room took up an entire wing of the palace. As her personal guard, I had been appointed a room within the wing, connected through an internal door to her bedchamber. Sumptuous jewel-stone fabrics decorated my sister's suite. The wealth of Dameron was clear from the silver-framed mirrors to the gem-studded jewelry box on the mantel. It was decadent, and compared to what I lived with my entire life, ostentatious. I reminded myself again, though, that with these fanciful riches also came an army of silver wolves who would help reclaim our kingdom. With only a moment to splash water on our faces, a team of dressmakers had arrived at Briar's door. It had been a long journey to Highwick, and though I'd slept, I'd hoped we'd get some rest. It hadn't dawned on me the wedding would be the moment we arrived. And now the evening was nearing, and the ceremony would take place at exactly midnight, the time of our birth. Symbolically, it made sense, and the more I thought about it, politically too. A good warrior should be prepared for an ambush, and I had totally missed this one. Not that it mattered all that much. It was inevitable, so better get it over with. Instead of dwelling on it, I thought about what midnight would bring. I loved that Briar and I had different birthdays, even though we were only born minutes apart. Today, Briar was 20 years old, and tomorrow I would be 2. We each had a full day to be celebrated by Velia's children, and I realized this was going to be my first birthday without her. The fairy's absence hit me anew. Ouch! Briar frowned down at the seamstress, prodding her with needles. The seamstress merely rolled her eyes, not the least bit apologetic. "Stay still," I called, chuckling at her squirming. "I am," Briar growled, eyeing me in the full-length mirror. "Shouldn't you be getting fitted too?" "They left a very fine silver jacket hanging in my wardrobe," I shrugged, "and a ceremonial sash to match the other guards." "I think you look better in gold." Briar always had a better sense for clothes. I was happy to let her pick my attire often, and let her mold the image of myself. "I'll wear what they tell me." My voice fell into a murmur, "since I'm a guard of Dameron now." My sister paused, watching my reflection. "Could you give us a moment?" she asked the 2 women pinning the hem of her dress. They rolled their eyes, but nodded, as if used to being dismissed by royalty. "Just don't sit down," the one with pins in her mouth muttered. "We'll be back." 10 minutes, the other said, and shut the door behind them. Briar hiked up her flowing lace skirts and stepped off her pedestal. She looked like a painting of the moon goddess, billowing white and silver skirts that cinched in her narrowed waist, long lace sleeves, V-shaped neckline, and silver buttons down her back. Once the crown waiting for her was on her head, she'd be the perfect picture of a queen. "You look gorgeous, Briar," I said, stuffing another almond into my cheek, trying to let the fact of chewing relieve how tightly I clenched my jaw. "I wish our parents were here to see it." Briar sighed. "I wish they were here too." She walked around the bed and put her hand on my forearm. "I'm sorry the king didn't announce who you were straight away. Maybe he's waiting until after the ceremony." Her worried thoughts mirrored my own. Once I'm married to Gray, it will solidify his claim to Olmdare. He'll probably share the news then. We'll see. Briar smiled. "You'll be a princess and a knight, Calla. You'll be formidable. While I'm holding high teas and birthing pups, you'll be galloping off into battle." Birthing pups. I shoved the bowl of almonds away, suddenly sick to my stomach. The roles of man and woman were so rigid, so constraining, completely controlling who we could be and what we would do with our lives. Everyone around me seemed so willing to play these parts, even Briar. Some even seemed like they wanted them. And while any mandatory role wouldn't be one I'd choose for myself, the desires of an individual meant nothing in a pack. There was no point even considering them. I glanced at my bedroom door, wondering when the siring of pups would commence. Gods, would Gray come here? Would I hear them together? My soul left my body, imagining those sounds. My cheeks heated, my skin prickling, as I swallowed back the panic. I scanned the room for wine, intending to get rip-roaring drunk at the wedding feast. There were only so many things my soul could take, and this moment had been one I'd been trying to reconcile for the last 7 years. I toyed with the amber stone hanging around my neck. "Are we sure we want to do this?" I asked Briar for the 100th time, placing the cool back of my hand to my flushed cheek. "We don't have a choice. You think we can defeat a powerful sorceress all on our own, Calla? And even so, what then?" This had been an ongoing battle our whole lives. Briar's countenance soured. We have no brothers, and even if we did, we'd still need these alliances. Our parents knew the importance of allies, or else they wouldn't have arranged this union. It was our mother's dying wish for Velia to see me to this day. I just wanted to give you one more chance to back out, Briar, I whispered. If you didn't want this, I would break you out of this castle myself. Briar bobbed her head. I know you would. She squeezed my hand. But I have accepted my fate. Gray and I may never love each other, but we have agreed to be friends and work together to save Almdare. It's the right thing to do. It's what our parents would have wanted, for the good of the pack. For the good of the pack, I muttered. You'd save us all if you could, Cal. Briar wiped at a tear under her eyes with a laugh. You're proud, stubborn, and single-minded. If I were a man, you'd be praising those qualities. Briar rolled her eyes. Let me do this. Let me honor our parents by honoring our traditions. My eyes softened, for possibly the 100th time in the last few days. I had to remind myself that being part of a pack meant sacrifice. Fine, I relented, though my stomach still churned. But I'm telling you now, I don't care for King Nero. He seems like a power-hungry oaf. Briar chortled. We'll steer clear of him as much as possible. She turned toward the stained glass windows that peered out over the lush summer forest. The wedding and feast will be boring, but then we can run through the trees with our new family, the best way to celebrate our birthday. I smiled, staring out toward the sun, setting through the endless sea of trees. The tightness in my chest eased at the thought of running, not having to circle the same patch over and over, but actually being able to roam. The sunset cast long beams of colorful light across the room as a light rap sounded on the door. Let's get on with it then, Briar sighed, giving me one last wink. I clambered off the bed, expecting to find the seamstress, but instead finding two guards. The older one, with a zigzagging scar down his cheek, spoke. The king has requested to speak with the princess's guard. What? Briar called from behind me. We swapped bemused looks. Will you be okay in here? I didn't like the idea of leaving her. Everything felt on tendered hooks in the lead up to the ceremony. Go, she nodded. I think I can handle being pricked by a few more needles while you're gone. So much for steering clear of the king, I muttered. I balled my hands into fists at my side, steeling myself for another encounter with the Silver Wolf King.